Hi guys, I'm Drake York. Welcome to this edition of Dirt Talk with Drake York, and I'm here with Lowell Moural, promoter of Cycling and Speedway. It's good to have you.
Thank you.
Today's show will be presented by Tommy Herseth Vintage Race Cars, Kevin Shera Designs, Shad Trucking, and Kimball Midwest. So, honored to have you.
Pleasure to be here, Drake.
Yeah, this is my favorite place. My mom, we walked in your house and she's like, "Oh, that's cute," and I said, "No, I think the racetrack's cute." So you've obviously been involved with this a very long time. How were you introduced to the sport, racing in general?
The sport of racing in general, that's hard to know exactly, but when I was about 5 years old, my uncle raced a modified at the old hardtop races out on 8th Street. And so that was my introduction to it. He would take me to the races when I was 5 or 6 years old, and back in those days, he'd probably go to jail for what he did now, but he would drop me off at the front gate and enough money for Cracker Jacks and a soda, and he would go in the pits and race. And so I don't think you could let a 5 or 6 year old off at the front gate now, but anyway, that was my introduction.
I like the Cracker Jack part.
Yeah.
Cycling Speedway, I mean, very, very popular now. How'd that come about?
Cycleland was a dream of
Being at the dog.
one of my mentors, and that was Bill Brownell and Denton Hill and Dick McAfee were the three men that actually started Cycleland in 1960. And so I rode motorcycles as a professional motorcycle racer for Bill Brownell out of the Honda Triumph shop in Chico, and so it just kind of fell in my hands after I was, when I became too old to make money racing, and then it just kind of fell into my hands at that point because they were getting old enough; they were retiring from this business.
Well, Brownell, as you mentioned, was helped with cycling. Who else helped with that success here at cycling?
That would have been Dick McAfee and he was primarily did most of the construction, and then Denton Hill was more the business manager type person of it. And of course, none of those three are around anymore. But I'm sure they're looking down and enjoying what's going on nowadays. I'm sure they're having fun with it.
Well, your family, I mean, racing is a family sport, no doubt about it. What is it like for you and your family to run Cycling Speedway?
Well, I love it. I have a good time with it, and apparently my family loves me because they just do it. I can't imagine they would have dreamed it up on their own, but they just kind of participate and follow, and it is a good family adventure for us as well.
Well, the years of Cycling Speedway, countless probably. How many years have you ran Cycling Speedway with the motorcycles and the outlaw carts?
A little over 35 years now. So it was 1980 when I promoted my first race here on this property. It was 1980, and I've been involved ever since.
Well, we're in your house right now, and right out of the front door is turn 4 of the dirt track.
It is.
What is it like living at a racetrack? I can imagine that, just waking up, stretching. Oh look, there's turn 4 right there.
Well, it's unique. I'm sure more than one person has driven in the property and going, "Wow, look at that!" But then, on the other hand, there's a lot of people that would die to live here. That go, "Man, this would be my ultimate dream." And so, what's it like living here with the racetrack? You really don't even notice it because we're working when the races are going on, so we're not home. And then it's easy to go to work in the morning. Let me tell you about that. You just open the door and you're at work. It is hard though to manage your own personal time because all day long people will come in and want to visit or want use of something, And so it is hard to get any getaway time or personal time. It is that is a challenge, but I enjoy it all so much that it doesn't really, it's not a burden, let's say. It's all fun.
Well, has it been getting harder as you age to run the racetrack?
What are you trying to say? Yes, it is actually, Drake.
I'm
That
sorry.
is true. That's why we're trying to bring young people in.
I'm sorry.
God, just joking. Bringing young people in, sometimes new ideas are good. Not all new ideas are good. And one of the hardest things for me to do as a promoter and track operator is people come to me with ideas that they think are new, and they're not new at all. And so they've been tried and didn't work, and so that's why we don't use them. And so that's the hardest thing, is that whole diplomatic side of it. And the older you get, the more set in your ways you get, and the less flexible you are. And so that's a challenge. It takes a certain person to do it. The next person after me is going to have to be a special person in order to make it work well, I think.
Well, I was here last year talking to you, and you told me and my dad about you raced flat track motorcycles. What was that experience like for you?
Well, that was a great experience. It was a few broken bones, I can tell you that. But anyway, it was a great experience. I loved it. I was involved in, like I said, from 5 years old. My uncle raced hardtops, and so my whole childhood growing up, well, we're going to race cars. My parents, my immediate family weren't racing family though. They didn't know anything about it. They didn't. They just didn't understand it, and so it was kind of all on my own what I did, and then I just got introduced to the motorcycle somehow, and it was a natural. It was equipment-wise cheaper and easier to get into, and then I discovered that there was a professional side of it, and it was just a natural. I just went with that and never really got back to the cars. So it was a great experience. It was fun. I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Well, I'm sure you won plenty of races and championships and that, right?
One more than my share, I'd have to say, yes.
How many championships, like race wins total? All that.
Championships. Most of them were at local tracks like this. Would have been local tracks. I don't know. For probably 14 to 18 years of my life, that's what I did, and I would have to say at least 12 or 14 championships, I would say. So, and a lot of races in between. Lucky.
Well, back then you probably raced with all of the flat track motorcycle greats. What was that like, and who were the greats back then?
The greats, I carry a picture around in my cell phone to this day for young people that they'll say, I raced or I did this, and I'm going, well, here's, and they'll ask me if I ever raced, and I go, did I ever race? And so I have a picture of myself in Kenny Roberts, passing Kenny Roberts at Ascot Park in 1974. I was riding one of Dick Mann's Triumphs at the time, and that was just like the holy grail to me, and it was fun. I remember every lap of it, and it was just awesome. And so Kenny Roberts was one of the greats. Gary Scott was one of the greats. Hank Scott, his brother, was a great rider. He's involved in NASCAR to this day as a mechanic. Carol Reese-Weber, there was, I don't know, countless number of riders, but Kenny Roberts, I'd have to say, was the one of the greatest ever.
Do you still watch flat track motorcycle racing, because Speed Sport does all that stuff?
I do, but there's not as much of that going on. But I can tell you, on a Saturday night, when the checkered flag falls during the summer here, I get stuff cleaned up and put away, and I come in and I turn the TV on because I have recorded the Motocross National from that day, and I'll watch it till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And so I'll turn it on and I'll watch that, and that's how I wind down, by watching the motocross. So I do enjoy all different levels of racing, and to this day, I enjoy it all.
Have you ever ran on a mile? I just want to point that out.
Yes, I have.
My dad loves the miles.
The miles were very fun. The half miles were more fun for me. The half miles were generally rougher and quicker. They had a different, it was a different strategy. So the miles were more like playing chess. You know, they talk about you're 130 miles an hour and turning it sideways into the corner on a mile dirt track. But when you are actually doing it, as your dad knows with driving a sprint car, it's the same way. It feels like slow motion when it's actually happening. And so you're not even aware of the speed. It doesn't happen until you start to get a little bit older. And then that's when you know it's time to retire. When you're coming off a turn at 120 miles an hour, 100 and going up to 130, and you're worried about that rider in front of you falling, making an error and falling, that's when it's time to hang it up, because you know you're not at that. If you're worried about that, you are no longer competitive. And so that's kind of when you know that. But yes, I have ridden a mile many times.
Well, what was it like running those speeds, as you mentioned, 120, 130 on a mile, and with that, like that much air, you can go flying off your bike in a wall and in a hospital. I mean, what was that like?
Well, you just don't think about it, Drake. You feel like when you're young, you're invincible. You know, you have to remember, I was 19, 20 years old in those days, and so you just feel like you're invincible. But the other thing about the mile, different than the half miles and the other races, was the drafting is just a phenomenal feature. You can, it's amazing the amount of pull or push that you get out of that drafting effect. It just the first time it happens, you're just completely unaware that it's going to happen and what the result will be, and it's just an amazing feeling.
Well, you were talking about that, and I was just thinking, does that, you said you had a strategy for the half miles, does that kind of change your strategy from a mile to half mile because you don't have to worry to draft, or
Right.
would you have to draft on a half mile?
No, there was a bit of draft on the half mile, but it didn't play into it. The half mile was just more go as fast and hard as you possibly can. That was the strategy. Just ride as hard as you can, be as physically fit as you could be. The strongest rider had the best advantage. Where the mile tracks were more of a chess game. The strategy was more like playing chess. Back in those days, unlike nowadays, the motorcycles are a bit different nowadays, so it doesn't happen quite as much. But back in those days, you wanted to be sitting about third place on the white flag. You did not want to be leading going down the back straight. If you were leading down the back straight, you were ending up 5th or 6th or maybe as far back as 10th. And so it was more of a strategy. So you get to those last laps, and not everybody, they weren't going full throttle the whole time, because they were jockeying for that correct position in order to draft down the final straightaway.
Well, we were talking about the motorcycles. Evel Knievel, probably one of the greatest stuntmen of all time. While you were riding, did you ever get a chance to see him jump or even meet him?
I did meet Evel Knievel. He was one of Bill Brownell's, one of my mentors, one of his best friends,
Wow.
actually. And so I got to meet Evel Knievel, and he came to Cycleland Speedway in about, I want to say 1970. He came to visit Brownell, and he came and he did over at the Orland Half Mile, jumped some cars and put on a show. But so he actually came to Cycleland, and I think that was about 1970 that happened. So.
You prepped Silver Dollar Speedway on Friday and then come here and prep the Outlaw Kart track. Is there a difference of how you prep the track compared to a sprint car for an Outlaw Kart?
Well, I guess that depends on who you ask, because I try my best, and everybody has an opinion, so yeah, that's an interesting thing. Definitely the technique for prepping for the lighter cars is different than the heavier cars. And so I can't say I still have a handle on the bigger cars yet, but we're working on it. We're getting closer to getting what I want. The dirt there is not my preferred dirt. It's very dusty, and so you can't get the track slick without dust, and that's what I'm struggling with there. So it may just be a matter of at some point resurfacing and starting over with the dirt.
Well, you guys running like the guys that we see today going into sprint cars, even NASCAR, Kyle Larson and Billy were two great examples. What is it like for you? I mean, what's that feeling inside when you see those guys go and do something big and that they raced here at Cycling Speedway? I mean,
it's very fulfilling. It's fun watching all these youngsters grow up. And when they're successful, like Kyle, and then now it looks like Rico, and I mean, so many of them. Like Matt DiBenedetto's been running the NASCAR regular the whole last year. But there's so many, I can't even name them all. And then the sprint car kids like Robert Ballou that grew up here and all that are sprint car champions in the Midwest now. It's very fulfilling, Drake, to do that, to know that you had a hand in that one way or another. You know, I can't say that if it wasn't for me, they would be successful. But, you know, that's one of the measures that you take on yourself as you get older is how many lives did you impact and what kind of an impact that was. And so it's just an awesome feeling. I love it.
well, you run two different kinds of motorsports, the motocross out there and the outlaw karts right over somewhere right there. What is your favorite sport to run? Which one do you like better?
Well, cars being the beginning for me, I always, I will never not enjoy the cars. I love them. But as a competitor, driving a car, there's only so much you can do as a driver. You can control the throttle and you can guide it to the best line that you can find on the racetrack, and you can do that. But once you've learned how to ride a motorcycle successfully and were in some form or another a championing or winning rider on a motorcycle, it's almost impossible to go back to cars. So I'd have to say I like the motorcycles the best. With a car, you're probably at best 50% of the result, unless you're the mechanic and the driver. With a motorcycle, you're about 90% of the result. You have to have a good motorcycle, but it does not have to be the best. The rider is the one that makes the decision there. So that's where my ultimate love is still with the motorcycles. They're far more dangerous though.
Yeah, you can break a lot more bones.
More bones.
Well, you were talking about all the kids coming through. What is that feeling inside? Kind of the same thing with all those drivers going up when you see happy kids running here at Cycling getting their start.
Oh, it's great. It's fun watching them. Fun to see how excited the parents are, as long as they control it a little bit. But the parents are all excited, and that's all good. I was able to present a trophy this weekend at the motocross. A young rider started here about a year and a half ago, and he won his first trophy ever last Sunday. He was just beside himself, and so he just was so happy, and so that's fun. The whole thing, it's just fun.
Well, what's the biggest challenge of being a promoter?
Oh my. I don't know.
I'll let you think here for a minute.
The biggest challenge is learning how to be a politician, and I can't say I've ever gotten very good at it. So other than that, finding the money to get it started, that's tough as well. But learning to be a politician, that's hard to do. Because you have your own opinions, and it's hard not to share them all the time.
Yeah, I've had that issue. Well, what effect has the Kyle Larson Outlaw Kart Showcase? I mean, we had you had this giant field out there of extra parking. I'd say like almost a mile of extra parking. And how much publicity did the showcase get?
I thought they did. There was a very big boost to what we do here at Cycleland. That was a big boost. I really appreciated what Kyle and his family did there. It was awesome to see him come back to his roots and give back, especially as young as he is in his career. You know, that's usually something another 10 years down the road that they consider that. And so that just shows how mature Kyle is and how much he loves the sport as well. I'd have to say he might love it more than I do at this point. I mean, you can tell that he loves it, absolutely.
Well, what's it like for the stepping stone? I mean, you give drivers their stepping stones, but also announcers. Ralph Shaheen, I mean, he got his start here, aka next person. You're welcome.
Yeah, we'll have to introduce you to Ralph and see where that goes.
Yeah. What's it like giving the young guys?
It's the same as with I was very, very pleased to see Ralph do as well as he did. Ralph came to me one evening. We were running flat track motorcycles at the time and also motocross on the other night. We were running flat track on Friday, motocross on Saturday in the same arena. And Ralph came to me one evening, and I was having a lot of trouble with the announcer that I had. And he told me he was looking for a job. He needed to work his way through college. He was taking communications at Chico State. And I said, you know what, son, you got me on the right night. I go, show up next week and the job's yours. And so Ralph came here. He worked here for 4 years while he was going to Chico State. He graduated from Chico State, and he came to me and he says, Lowell, he goes, I don't think I can work for you this summer. He goes, I've had a great time here, but I'm going to go get a job with ESPN. And I go, well, good luck with that. You tell me how that works out, and the job will still be yours when you come back. So about 6 months later, I get a card, a little business card in the mail from Ralph Shaheen. It says ESPN. And so that was how that worked. So,
well, before the camera started rolling, me and you were talking about working on an IndyCar team. What was that like for you?
that was fun. I was a very young man at the time. I was 18 years old. I was working for a man named Fred Gearhart out of Fresno. And he owned and operated the Thermo King Special. And Gary Bettenhausen was the driver. So like I said, I was a very young man at the time. And so what I was a TIG welder in the fab shop for the race cars. They built truck bodies. It was a huge plant that we worked in. But one area of it, I'd say about 10,000 feet, was for race cars only. And we worked in there. There was about 6 of us that worked in there at the time. And Gary Bettenhausen was the driver. During that, I think that would have been 68 or 69, somewhere in there. And he didn't do as well in the IndyCar, but he was the champ that year. It might have been 70 that he was the champ, so I would have been a little bit older than 18 at that time. But I think it might have been 70 when Gary Bettenhausen was the dirt car champ, and that was for the Thermo King team that I worked there for. So I wasn't like a crew member, a pit crew member, that kind of thing. You just got to hang out. You were more like a flunky at the races at that. You worked in the fab shop and you just got to go to the races is the way that worked. It was very fun.
Did you ever get to go to the Indy 500 during that time period?
Did go to the Indy 500 during that time period, yes. Yes.
Well, also before the camera started rolling, you were saying you were working on the snack bar here at Cycling Speedway and the bathrooms. What are the 2016 changes?
Just trying to enlarge some of that and make it more comfortable. Other changes for 2016, the calendar is just slightly different. No real rule changes. A lot of ideas rolling around my head though. And then just mostly just still trying to make improvements on the property to keep making it nicer. One of the changes, we've got maybe some new personnel coming on board this year. We had Randy Van Kuren come on last year. He was a great help to me. And so we've got more people at that level. As you mentioned earlier, I might be getting a little bit older, and so we're going to try to bring a little bit younger people in and give them more decision-making power, and maybe take a little bit of that power away from me and pass some of that on. As we find the right people, we do have to find the right people for that. But anyway, so those are basically it. Maybe, you know, a little bit better help and some expansion in some of the areas.
Is it going to be like Daytona Rising, cycling Rising? Can we do that?
Well, I'm not sure we're ever going to get there.
You can get a lot of promotion from that.
Yeah.
Well, there's step one over there at the snack bar.
Yeah.
Today's show has been presented by Roberto Marquez, attorney at law, Packard Haslam Automotive, Smith Racing, and Pedersen Motorsports. And I'll see you guys next time. Thank you, Lowell.
Very good. Thanks, Drake. It's been a pleasure.